I'm Brian Murphy, and I'm here with my lovely sister Annie Murphy, and she did me a great favor by suggesting this book, A History of U.S. Feminisms by Rory Dicker. And we both read it, and I went through and tried to make a lot of notes because I am really interested in the topic of feminism, but mostly because Annie Murphy has been a real inspiration to me throughout my whole life. And in a life that is difficult for all women, Annie Murphy really took up the spirit of being a champion for all girls and women as we were growing up and standing up to her pretty tough older brothers, and I've always had a lot of respect for her gumption. And so when I got this idea to start doing podcasts, the first person I thought to ask was Annie, because I know I have always been so impressed by your intelligence and your spirit and your tenacity to fight for people that are in need of help. And I know that you do that, and I know our audience doesn't know you as well as I do, but I think a lot of that's going to come across in our talk today.
Thank you, Brian.
And you did a great job of picking a example of subject matter. This is a great book for anybody who's interested in what feminism means in the history of America. Rory Dicker did a great job. It's very short, but it really has an excellent explanation of what the changes, the dramatic changes in life has been for lives of women in America has been over the last 200 years. And so I'm going to start off just by basically giving a little background on Rory Dicker based on what we read in the book, and then we're going to just jump in and start gabbing about it.
Let's gab.
That's
great.
So,
well, thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Brian.
You're welcome, man.
Yeah.
In the preface, Rory Dicker, who teaches courses in English and women's gender studies at Vanderbilt, cobbles together a few recent developments in America in entertainment. She uses the movie Frozen and accentuates how different it was from its predecessors in the Disney canon of movies, which really is such a basis for the mythology of children in America.
Absolutely.
Of how we understand the world.
How I grew up understanding the world, for sure.
I mean, I can remember being a little bit embarrassed going to The Little Mermaid.
Okay.
Because I was going with you and I think mostly a group of your friends who were 2 years younger than me, and I wasn't very old at that point.
Yeah.
And it was something that was for girls, but I love Disney, and it was a big part of our lives. And it's something that kind of fades into the background of your psyche, and you don't even really think about it very much, and then you see a movie like Frozen.
Oh my gosh,
and it's such a stark departure.
Completely.
Of how women, their roles and narratives for entertainment were for the purposes of being a foil against the male characters. I mean, the Little Mermaid's actually kind of a counterexample of that because she is the protagonist.
She's the protagonist.
She drives the story, but
her whole
the
thing
motivation
is shaping herself to not just a little bit change herself to fit in with a male partner, but to completely forsake her family and her upbringing, her species, if you will.
Her species.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
I mean, to give it
Changes
all
herself
up
from a
because
mermaid to a human.
Yeah. So, when Frozen 2, absolutely is kind of, I feel like our audiences today just wouldn't even they don't even tolerate The Little Mermaid anymore.
It upsets them. It's upsetting.
Well, and I look back on it now and it's so problematic. It really is. So,
well, you say that it's problematic. I use the word upsetting. What's problematic?
If you think about you mentioned the canon, right? So like that, I mean, this is something that's talked about like in feminist circles all the time, just like this trope of kind of the female character becoming only, she's only saved, or she only becomes kind of important in her proximity to the male.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, if you think about like Beauty and the Beast, which is one of my favorites of all time, and part of it was like, oh, well, Belle is a reader, right? So she has this like intelligence about her, and she was like, you know, remarkable and kind of countercultural for like in her little town and village.
Mm-hmm.
And then she goes to meet this beast, and it's basically just what is that called? Stockholm syndrome, right? Where she just like
identifies with her captor.
Where she's just like, oh no, he's not so bad. He's right, yeah. But like, and this notion of like, well, she has to save him, and I mean, anyways, but yeah, the Little Mermaid is. Anyways, yeah. I mean, that's what I grew up on. And then I look at Frozen, and it's like we look at our niece, and like nieces, right? But like who we love the pieces. Did you know they call them niblets now? So you don't have to
Nikki told me them. I think we call them niblets.
To think that Frozen is the story that has captured her imagination, just the songs and whatever, but it's like
right.
The male romances are totally kind of a side. It's not really what that story's all about. In a way, it pokes criticism at the fact that the younger sister, it's Anna and Elsa, like falls head over heels for like a bad dude, right? You know,
right.
And
well, he turns out to be bad.
Turns out to be bad. We thought he was good.
Mm-hmm. But she does fall for the good guy as well.
At the end, yes. She does, yeah. Isn't that the story? But yeah, to think that like the messaging that gives to a young person and what that imparts in your psyche is just so different. But yeah. Anyway, so she talks about Frozen.
So
for Frozen to
sum it
exist,
up, modern life is still fraught.
Totally fraught.
Tough issues of gender.
Yeah.
That the difference between the sexes and how the sexes have to live together, seeing the world in such different terms, and then laid on top of that, a history of such injustice to the weaker sex is very problematic. So I think what I appreciate about Rory Dicker, the author's efforts in combing through the history, is to give us a much clearer understanding of how we got here. It wasn't easy. A lot of women had to go through a lot of shit in order to, not change people's minds, but to force them to behave in a civilized manner.
Yeah,
because and we're going to get into race as well when we talk about this, because that is another stark injustice of American history, is that not only have men dominated and abused women, white people have dominated and abused non-white people. And so, jumping into it, chapter 1, after she gives us her introduction, which is almost a parable of modern sex relations, she starts by talking about overhearing a conversation, which was probably fictional, but she recounts in it a conversation where she overhears a adolescent daughter talking to a mother, a young woman who's coming of age and understanding sexuality and body image, and she talks about a conversation where Rory Dicker can clearly hear a young girl, a young adolescent woman expressing hesitancy to eat implying she's got a problem with body image. Problem with body image probably given to her largely by the forces of a male-dominated culture. Then she hears an anecdote about a woman ordered to stop breastfeeding at work. And then another anecdote about a female grad student who was sexually harassed. And she kind of crafts this one day to highlight the different ways women are shamed, women are harassed, and women are sexually objectified, to kind of sum it up like, it's tougher being a woman than being a man. Because men are more powerful currently, and men are not concerned about women as people. So part of me, and I'll confess to you, Nate, part of my reaction was, give me a break. Those three situations are bad in their own way, but saying a patriarchal culture that hates women as the cause is an incorrect and oversimplified explanation for what's going on in each of those situations. That's kind of a male, and that was my reaction, and that's kind of a male knee-jerk reaction. What do you think about that?
That was your reaction?
Yeah, that was honestly part of my reaction when I read that. Was like that's kind of
like those are small things.
No, not small. I would say that girls with eating disorders, women feeling, I'm not so sure about the breastfeeding I would put in there, but women feeling self-conscious and men being sexually aggressive are not exactly injustices that men are responsible for. There was definitely, I definitely had a feeling of uneasiness about making that could be oversimplified.
Okay. Poor you.
Poor me.
Poor you. Sorry. I mean, I think that those examples point to the fact that the way that we experience our gender and the way it is in society, she's kind of pointing to an example of the psychological ramifications with the eating disorders. She's talking about the kind of professional work-life ramifications that we can have with the breastfeeding example, and then
which I am conceding is not that is a misogynist. There's no
and then sexual harassment.
reason.
I mean, like fuck. I mean, it's
yeah, but what's sexual harassment and
what's really sexual harassment,
right.
And you get to determine that.
Well,
right?
men don't get to determine that, but there isn't going to be any interactions between the sexes without some misunderstandings.
Well, yeah, misunderstanding, sure, but like the fact that you can be I mean, honestly, it's just like friggin' tale as old as time, right? The grad right? But the grad student who comes in a position of like needing this person to be her mentor, needing this person to be her thesis advisor. She's got to ingratiate herself.
The position
right?
of power makes it more complicated.
So like that example, we can say sexual harassment, and you can be like, well, but what really was that specific scenario? And you can say, oh, well, maybe he wasn't really out of line. The notion is that like the complications of being in a power dynamic with work when it's also a gendered situation. This is something women have to navigate every day in trying to be a professional. Even in academia, where you would think that, oh, maybe you might be protected because, I don't know, people are supposed to be more woke, right? But anyway, so I think that those examples of like what you see in one day is like a little microcosm, and if you can or cannot, it's interesting to me too, the fact that you're like, do I buy into what she's saying?
I definitely have to be honest that on an intellectual level, I agree with everything you and she are saying about that, but my maleness does make me understand that it's more complicated.
Well,
than
and
that.
also it makes you feel a bit threatened, right? To think that those things that you're taking that seem like, why are those things that are that important? Like, any person who,
not that they're not important, but that behaviors can be misinterpreted and wrongs are not absolute. The power thing, I think it's an important distinction to say that when there is some sort of professional relationship, although think about how many people start their marriages at work. I mean, sexual relationships are
all right. Well, like,
very.
let's put that aside and like say that, like, why is this the preamble for a book, right?
Yeah,
So
that's a good point. But maybe we're getting. This is so funny because this is such a small part of the book, and we can go on and on about this.
Let me offer a theory about this for a second. So, when you approached me with this idea, you called me and you say, I want to do a podcast about feminism, and I
wanted to do a podcast with you, I thought a good topic for us to talk about was feminism,
which is fantastic, and also like
it was kind of
it was kind of like, oh my God, is he a pod person now? Like, that's so sweet. Is he progressing?
A pod person.
But you are. Oh my goodness, a podcast.
We've done puns.
But
our mother would be so proud.
I know, she would be so proud. But anyways, so you said and I said, okay, so let's think about this from like a point of view of like, okay, if we're producing something, we're going to have a conversation, we're going to put something out in the world, whether or not how big it gets, or tiny, just an audience of 2 maybe, but you were specific in that, and I know that you are coming from I know enough leeway to say, okay, the way this could be is like, a skeptic versus the person who's bought it. That's one way we could look at this whole conversation about.
Yeah, it's nice. I have
right?
a foot in both worlds.
Like, right. So we can, and I was like, well, and I think that one of the things when I was looking through books for us to look at, and you said, hey, choose a book, I think it should be about like the history of feminism. And I said, well, it was actually really somewhat difficult to find a book.
What was your process for figuring out?
So my process was like, I started looking at the different things that are out there, and a lot of them are like very academic articles, and I was like, well, if I were to try to kind of give a person who's a total skeptic, let's say you're just some like bro dude out there, like, bro dude.
That's a really sexist,
right?
really sexist thing to say.
They exist. We all know who they are.
What do you mean, you people?
Anyway, to look at something that provides kind of a brief synopsis of the history of the movement, right? It's not coming at it from like a particular, I think, argumentative point of view. I think it's more just like showing us the arc, right? And of course, like, she's a feminist scholar, like, we get like her lens, I get that, but like, so choosing it was basically like, okay, this seems fairly straightforward. I had not read it before. We read it for the first time together, so I was like, well, got reviewed as kind of like a primer. And do you say primer or primer?
Well, if you're British, you say primer.
Oh, I say primer. I've always wanted to be British, but anyway, so it seemed like a way that would be less confrontational to just talk about, not for you specifically, but just in general, if we're going to have this conversation, right? Like,
we talked about something for 20 minutes that I thought we were talking about for 2.
Right, okay. So we should move on, right?
No. I mean, but
that's the point, like
But for the audience, okay, we're trying to talk about, or we're trying to dissect a book written by a woman who did an in-depth study of feminism, which is a totally loaded term.
Yes.
It means so many things to so many different people, and when people throw it around, they can throw it around as a badge of honor or a badge of shame.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
Which is
let's
so
jump
annoying.
to that.
So annoying.
Let's jump to definitions.
All right. Okay.
In the book, she says, feminism. Okay, the first definition she gives is from the American Heritage Dictionary. Feminism,
Mm-hmm.
the belief in the social, political, and economic equality of the sexes. What do you think about that?
Great. I'd love for that to happen.
No problem with that.
Where are
She
you?
did
Tell
it.
me
I'm on
again.
page 2 right there.
Yeah, the belief in the social, political, and economic equality of the sexes.
Okay.
Yeah.
She then
Yes.
immediately throws out another definition from Barbara Smith.
Mm-hmm.
Feminism is the political theory and practice that struggles to free all women,
Mm-hmm.
women of color, working class women,
Mm-hmm.
poor women, disabled women, Jewish women, lesbians, old women, as well as white, economically
Yeah.
privileged heterosexual women.
Mm-hmm.
Anything less than this vision of total freedom is not feminism, but merely female self-aggrandizement.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about that?
I mean, I think that that first definition, feminism, the belief in the social, political, economic equality of the sexes, to me that is, that's like entry level feminism, right? Like a notion that everyone who's the dad of a daughter should be able to get behind that, right? Like, if we're talking about like the U.S. cultural norm. What Barbara Smith gets into, I think, is
it's a history of U.S. feminism, so we are going from that assumption.
So, what she is getting into, Barbara Smith is getting into, is a little bit more what we'll figure out in this conversation, this notion of third wave feminism, like a more nuanced portrayal of the project of feminism and what it really is. Mm-hmm. So I think that there's like a distinction between the philosophical notion and the project of it. Does that make sense? Like those two distinctions. So.
Well, then she jumps to Bell Hooks, who
Mm-hmm.
doesn't capitalize the B or the H in her name, which is madness. And
no, it just has to do with, do you know
Bell
she
Hooks,
lives in Kentucky?
No.
Yeah.
Where?
I think she's a teacher at Berea.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, professor. Yeah.
And so
could be wrong about that.
Bell
Sorry.
Hooks' definition is feminism is.
Oh, do you know why she does that? Because she doesn't think
No.
that any individual should have like power. I think this is going to be like a really rough idea, but it has to do with power.
Very
That we should be like, everyone should be even. There shouldn't be like
punctuation.
just go on.
Yeah, that's nuts.
Brian's not bought in with Bell Hooks.
Yeah.
That's okay. That's fine.
Feminism is the struggle. This is Bell Hooks, who
Right.
I don't know a lot about, but apparently you do.
I don't know a lot about Bell Hooks.
Okay.
No.
Feminism, this is a quote. Feminism, this is a quote from Bell Hooks, who is a academic who apparently lives in Kentucky, where we live. We're in Lexington right now. Feminism is the struggle to end sexist oppression.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, it is necessarily a struggle to eradicate the ideology of domination that permeates Western culture on various levels, as well as a commitment to reorganizing society so that the self-development of people can take precedence over imperialism, economic expansion, and material desires. What do you think about that?
Well, she's just throwing in the notion of, if you're looking at systems of domination, patriarchy is one, but capitalism is another. So and imperialism is another, colonialism is another, like, that she says feminism in general is not just about, like, let's be more expansive about this notion, and it's not just about females, it's about equality, period.
Well, that might be Dr. Hooks, Bell Hooks's hope, but I don't think you can define a word. She says, I don't think you say the definition of something that is well known, like feminism, is something that few people have heard of and that thing and have even associated with. So I think Bell is out there with that one.
Well, I think that people define feminism in a variety of ways. I think it can be a polarizing term. And if you were to talk to, like, Joe Schmo on the street, this first definition of equality is a little more palatable than this notion of, like, oh, feminism is the struggle to end all sexist oppression, and oppression actually is a layered, like, system of dominance. And so that's fine. I mean, we can say, oh, that's not the feminism I want to take on. Like, I don't want to take on that type of feminism, or that's not my definition of it. You could say that, that's fine, but she's also coming from, she's a current modern day scholar. Yeah, like she's still, so she is in this, like, third wave too, which we'll get into as far as what is first, what is second, what is third. So the notion of feminism and its project has become much more expansive.
Right. And I'm glad you jumped ahead and started defining terms. We're going to get there. First wave feminism means the feminist movement started around the middle of the 19th century, I mean 1848, which is when women in America really started making the push to get a vote. And if you don't remember, which I didn't until I read this book, women didn't get the vote until 1919. And so, well, nationwide. They did get it a little bit before that in certain states out west. But around 1914, Carrie Chapman Catt had the quote that feminism was a worldwide revolt against all artificial barriers which laws and customs interpose between women and human freedom. I think that's a really good definition.
I like that. I mean, the revolt is a scary word for many people.
Yeah.
But you're right. I mean, that's what it took.
Yeah,
right.
It did.
Yeah.
All right. So in general, you and I have kind of been jousting a little bit about these, but what do you think about typical Joe Schmo in America? What do you think their perspective on feminism is?
I mean, I'm pretty pessimistic about it.
Why?
Because Trump is our president. I mean, I'm not sure what the majority of, so also to kind of own my context and where I'm coming at, I am a graduate level educated, white woman who grew up
That's
in
a good point. I
privilege,
didn't
right?
give much about your background.
Yeah.
Graduate level. What is your postgraduate studies history?
Technically, it's a master's in humanities. I studied feminism, religion,
study feminism.
religion, and kind of the intersection of Christianity, feminism, and art theory.
Specifically, you did an in-depth study of feminism pre-American history, and you looked at how feminism and Catholicism intertwine, right?
Yeah,
And how did women use Catholicism in Europe before? Didn't they use the Holy Orders as a opportunity? Scout.
There's a dog here.
There's a dog here.
Her name is Scout. She's also a feminist.
How did women of Europe, and this is obviously digressing from the book, but how did women of Europe use the Holy Orders? Because the Holy Orders gave them independence from marriage.
It's hard to say. Like, those were your options, right? You could be, if you were of a family that had.
But if self-sufficiency requires you to relieve yourself from male domination, the holy orders, being in a nun.
Yeah.
No?
In some ways, you're getting rid of. Hang on just a second.
It
Scout.
doesn't matter. It's not.
Scout.
It's fine.
Well, you could say that I'm going to bypass the immediate domination of a male figure in my household in the form of, say, a husband, who will then, saying anatomically, like, everything works fine, that, like, you're going to sign up also for being a mother and having childbirth and raising children. So you're saying, I'm not really all in. It could be deadly, absolutely. I'm going to instead sign up for a cloistered life where you're kind of just, okay, well, I'm going to take this patriarchy and make it a little bit more less immediate in my life, but you're also still subject to patriarchy, right? Like, I mean, the church is incredibly patriarchal, so, and misogynistic, I would argue. Sorry, but
that's interesting. You still have a little bit of qualm about that.
I don't know. I'm just saying there might be a public out there, but like, no. I mean, the church is incredibly misogynistic.
Affleck.
Obviously. Anyway, so no, that's part of my background is I am interested in the ways that I kind of like in some ways feel like deeply hopeful that religion can provide some sort of means to a meaningful life for a woman, but ultimately I feel like it's all super steeped in just like messed up power structures, so I just don't think it's really possible. But anyways.
So
that's
your background. You
and
are
I work
feminist.
in higher education.
You have done
Yes.
in-depth studies into
I've done some
feminism.
studies. Yeah.
So, chapter 2 of the book is called First Wave Feminism, Fighting for the Vote. And basically she starts by talking about what proto-feminism is, and that is the writings of, maybe I'll skip past it, but,
Scout, come here.
she talks about the period from the 1790s to 1848, which is termed proto-feminism, probably because in 1848 is when Lucretia Mott, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Jane Hunt, Martha Wright, and Mary Ann McClintock met at Seneca Falls for the first time and would continue to do so annually through the 1850s. Stanton drafted the Declaration of Sentiments announcing women's equality to men and outlined their grievances with their treatment in American society. So, we understand that women started fighting for their rights at the beginning of history, and through the eons of time made not a lot of progress in European society, which was the precursor to American society.
Okay.
And in the 1850s, there was a change, and this was largely due to the social upheaval of America getting to the point where it understood that there was a large segment of the population that was not going to tolerate slavery. And so this is getting to the point where humans are going to have to articulate that you cannot have different classes of dignity between humans based on physiological characteristics, saying that people who are black are not human and people who are white are. Then you get to the question of, are people who are male human and people who are female not human? It's not the way they thought about things, but it is exactly what they were talking about. They were getting to the point where, why do we have disparate treatment for people that are the same?
Are one way versus,
Right,
exactly.
they essentially are the same.
Are the same, yeah.
So, these women started publishing first and foremost. They started meeting in groups, but this is before there's any sort of broadcasting or television, so the first thing they can do is they can either speak in public or they can publish, written works. And so, of course, publishing is very important to the movement, and so that's what they do. So I guess I'm not surprised that the women would start publishing before they would start organizing, but I'm a little shocked that when they did start to form, they were excluded from a similar civil rights group, the anti-slavery movement, which I spoke of. I think it's an important sociological phenomena that is counterintuitive to our view of the world. If there is a group of white men that have the moral fortitude to acknowledge that slavery should not be permitted, how can the same group not see the similarity to their treatment of women as not acceptable?
I agree. I mean,
Right.
it is, I don't know. I guess I can make some guesses as to like that.
Probably the level of cruelty. I mean, the level of cruelty to African Americans would have been so dramatic that basically, white men and white women that were against slavery really weren't against a distinction between people treating different races differently. They just didn't want it to be so extreme.
Maybe, I think, and I'm not exactly I'm not familiar at all with the particular kind of morality plea, like what was going on in the churches, what was going on to kind of create this kind of awakening of a moral conscience when it comes to slavery. My guess is that the people in the North, because they were not in a position to be slave owners, could have some sort of moral, they weren't benefiting from it. Right? So that's
it makes it
why
pretty easy
makes
for
it
them
easy
to take
to say,
the
oh, that's
morally,
bad, that's evil, when you're like, well,
morally superior. Easy act, morally superior.
easy act,
if you
morally
don't
superior,
get the benefit
if you're
of
also
being
getting rid of it
morally
is no,
inferior person.
it's not going to affect you as an individual to get rid of this. Now, if my wife starts like wanting half my money or that becomes much more threatening. So it's because people aren't morally pure, like they're not, we don't, anyways,
So it's crazy to think about from our perspective, but women weren't even allowed, the men who were advocating for the abolishment of slavery wouldn't even allow women to speak at their meetings. They didn't want to be a part of it.
Yeah.
So Seneca Falls is a watershed moment in women's liberation. In 1848, it's traditionally recognized as the beginning of the women's movement in the United States. Before I read this book, if you'd asked me anything about Seneca Falls, I could have told you that it rang a bell, but I probably couldn't even told you that it had anything to do with feminism. What's your take on, before you read this book?
I think a lot of people don't know that that's where it originated. I mean, I think we kind of did because our mom grew up in upstate New York near Seneca Falls.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So, I mean, that's why I kind of...
She had familiarity with it, so we had familiarity with it.
Yeah, but I think a lot of people wouldn't know that.
I mean, I think it's interesting that when the women's suffrage movement starts in 1850, women's suffrage wasn't even a sticking point. Women wanted it, but there were other issues that concerned women.
Yeah.
Property rights. They weren't even allowed to own property in the 1850s.
I know, it's crazy.
They would have liked to have gone to college. Oberlin was the first women's college. I forget the year.
Yeah, liberal arts.
And they liked to be able to earn an independent living. They weren't even allowed to be employed. I mean, think about that, Annie. Can you imagine a world in which you had to choose? Well, that was a prospective choice for you. You need to choose between your right to work and your right to be allowed a voice in the political arena.
Can I imagine that? No, I mean, I'm
really
lucky AF.
Yeah.
Right? Because of these people. But yeah, when you think about, like, when I was reading it and thinking about the very simplistic well, they had to be so strategic about how, the fact that they couldn't, of course they couldn't vote, but they couldn't own property, you couldn't enter into a contract, you couldn't go to college, you couldn't, you didn't have, even if like you came to a marriage with property and money that was given to you that you had inherited, as soon as you got married it was now yours.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you couldn't technically inherit, I'm not quite sure how all that worked, but yeah, it blows your mind. So they had to start in very strategic ways.
Mm-hmm. So, and then the Civil War ends, and there's the 15th and 16th Amendment, and the 15th Amendment giving the vote to black men is passed. This was a real kick in the gut for white women.
Sure.
When passage of the 14th Amendment began to be considered after the Civil War, some white women made their opinions known that they thought race was a more important consideration than gender. Elizabeth Cady Stanton said that a white woman's vote was worth more than a black man's. Not a particularly woke viewpoint.
Not in our context.
No, not in our context.
No, and I think, I think it comes down, we all want power, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we all want autonomy, and even really well-meaning individuals will, stomp on somebody else's neck to get it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it's an interesting period. The Civil War's over. The federal legislature has told the states that they have to let black men vote. And now we see the individual states reacting.
Mm-hmm.
Out west, the first place to let women vote is the Wyoming Territory in 1869. But then, when the territory got statehood in 1890, they didn't take the right to vote away from women. Utah did it the same way as well. Of course, they had a unique situation for wanting women to vote. Of course, the Mormon population of Utah saw that polygamy and plural marriage was threatened, and so they thought having women, which they had more of out there than non-Mormons who would be moving in, would be mostly men coming in for mining and other endeavors. So basically that ends the first wave of feminism, and then chapter 3 of the Dickerites, second wave of feminism, is seeking liberation. Well, we kind of skipped ahead. We get to 1920 is when women get the vote universally through the United States. They passed the 19th Amendment. So we go from the Civil War, African American men are given the right to vote. It's obviously not honored in the South. It's not honored very well in most of America. And then we go into the rest of the country gets to change their voting laws state by state, but then in 1919 the 19th Amendment, or 1920 the 19th Amendment is passed and women can vote. And then we get into second wave feminism. So we have, I think it's interesting, she starts first wave feminism chronologically and starts giving the whole pre-runner to American feminism by talking about, what was the state of feminism before women were organized in America. But then when you jump into second wave feminism, she jumps kind of into the middle and goes right to 1970. So we have this large gap in time between 1920, women get the right to vote, 1970, 50 years. What was going on in between? Well, she explains that as, when you have a movement who's, by and large, was only lobbying for one specific thing, and they get it, it kind of kills the movement.
Sure.
There's a lull. So you got the Roaring Twenties, obviously. We think of flappers. We think of social norms being changed a lot, prohibition. America really doesn't know what to do with itself. And so then we jump ahead and we get an update on who Betty Friedan was. The first president of the National Organization for Women, author of The Feminine Mystique. She doesn't give us a synopsis of each great work of feminist argument that she mentions by title, but I'm glad she mentions this one. She talks about that there wasn't much to report in the 20s.
Oh, now we're getting into the labor force rate.
Yeah, there's a lot of statistics that I was interested in the book that give you an idea of how things have changed. But really, we can all kind of understand that even though women aren't being very well organized between the period from 1920 and 1960, there has to be a heck of a lot of sociological change. There's technological change.
Workforce change, there's...
Heck, I mean, we got all the time period, we got the Great Depression, we got World War II.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
It's an interesting point that from 1920 to 1960, this kind of dead period in feminism, the only organization to refer to itself as feminist was the National Women's Party. Dicker doesn't quite state this as a fact, but she implies there's good evidence to believe that some women may have been afraid in this period to be associated with feminists because that could lead to an association with communists.
Sure.
Going back to some of the definition of feminism, it's easy to see how some would make that association. And you think that maybe since the last 2,000 years have been dominated by men, and we are only recently moving into a period where women are getting a comparatively equal say in how we live our lives, that maybe this prolonged animosity towards socialism will end?
An animosity towards socialism and communism? I think that socialism in general is a more humanitarian orientation, and as I think that we're leaning that way, right? I think that the country, if you look at the history of our world, right, the countries that have had women fully enfranchised in education and work the longest are socialized countries.
Socialist countries.
Socialist countries, like, so, and maybe also socialized, but, so, it's an evolution. Like, where is the pendulum swinging? And I think it's swinging that way. I don't know, we freaking love our capitalism here in the U.S., so.
Well, do you think that femininity is to socialism as masculinity is to capitalism?
Ooh, kind of, yeah. I think that there's something that the masculine drive, that kind of testosterone, it's really testosterone, you know, the need for like ownership and territorialism, I think is ultimately like the capitalist drive, like the desire to possess and lay claim tends to be a much more male drive.
Do you think you need both?
Maybe to a degree. I mean, I like yin and yang. I don't know. I mean, but yeah.
The book's short, but there's a lot of great historical vignettes in it, and one of them that she pulls out is, and I had never heard before, but I think it might be one of the most important acts of a single
Oh, God.
person in the last 100 years of American history.
This is crazy. This is crazy.
This is crazy.
I
In
freaking love this.
1964, President Johnson got the Civil Rights Act passed through Congress. Title VII of the Act established the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. So, apparently, there was an old congressman from Virginia named Howard Smith, who was a Democrat, but also a segregationist. This is so crazy because this has come up in the news recently because of things Biden said.
Real? Oh, yeah. Because he was like, oh, this is this guy?
I don't know if it's the same guy, but he's talked about how when he was a young...
Yeah, because God,
what is he? Is he
really
a senator?
old.
Yeah,
he was, like,
he was a senator.
in politics in the 60s. Yeah.
No, I don't think of that. But there's carryover.
Yeah.
This guy was in there in the 60s.
Okay.
And he was still in there whenever the 70s or 80s, whenever Biden showed up.
Okay.
And so this guy, before we get into what Biden's role is, President Johnson's got the Civil Rights Act passed through Congress. Title VII of the Act, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. So, apparently there was an elderly congressman from Virginia named Howard Smith, a Democrat, but also a segregationist. The legislation was originally worded only to forbid discrimination on the basis of race, color, religion, or national origin. He thought if the word sex were also included as a protected class, the bill wouldn't be able to get enough votes, therefore sinking the whole endeavor. So it got put in, and it passed. So it's interesting the way assholes sometimes get hoisted on their own petards. That's a great
phrase.
Hoisted on your own petard.
What's a petard?
I think it has to do something with like medieval. I think it's medieval artillery. It's like if you shot a cannon shot and you
attach yourself to it somehow.
Somehow.
It's not just like a sword of some sort.
No, hoisted, like shot.
Hoisted on your own
petard.
Petard.
I probably shouldn't use it since I don't even know really what it means.
Who knows?
But that's what it means.
We're apologizing if it's offensive. Well, there you go.
I'm not apologizing.
I know, he doesn't apologize. He doesn't care. Well, joke's on you, Howard Smith.
Yeah, especially if not, it's offensive to Howard Smith.
I mean, but Howard Smith, like, you know, all those
fuck Howard Smith.
Fuck Howard Smith.
Fuck
all those people had wives. Some of them had really smart wives who were like, what the fuck, you better not vote against this.
Well,
they don't give a shit. I know they don't give a shit about their wives. They're all just freaking...
Alright.
Anyways.
So America's governmental system is not perfect. Sometimes
really?
it works the way it's supposed
weird.
to, and sometimes it doesn't. I think your perspective of how imperfect it is would strongly be colored by how often the system had not lived up to its obligation to you on a personal level.
Yes.
So,
isn't that true? That's very true. Yes.
So, there was Betty Friedan and others in 1966, and the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission had been set up. The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission is there being run by, guess who?
Oh my God.
Men.
Is it men?
It's
oh my
men.
God, no way.
You know that's what Clarence Thomas did before he became a Supreme Court Justice?
Has he worked on this?
No,
he
was the EEOC.
Yeah?
A conservative for Bush.
Oh boy.
And that's where he was harassing Anita Hill. Motherfucker.
What a dick.
But that's where third wave feminism starts, at the hearings.
That's right.
That's right.
That's right.
Or at least
bless you, Anita.
That's what we're talking about. Realize, we're not even old enough to be considered. You're not even old enough to be considered part of third wave feminism. So you're.
Oh, I'm like second plus.
No, you're fourth.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's get into that.
All right.
Okay.
So, The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. How well did it do? Not very well by by women's measure. They start reporting sex discrimination to the EEOC. One example being sex discriminated want ads in newspapers.
Yeah.
This was one of the examples that
women's work.
I gave to Aaron. No, yeah, like this. That's women works. This is what men are for.
Yeah.
So now you need a private run watchdog to watch the public run watchdog. And that's NOW. That's the National Organization for Women. I like NOW's mission statement to take action to bring women into full participation in the mainstream of American society. Now, assuming all the privileges and responsibilities thereof in truly equal partnership with men.
Mm-hmm.
So, the lawsuit on behalf of flight attendants.
This is like
do you remember the details about this?
I think it's like you
they
had
would
to be
fire
under 30
you.
as
They'd
soon as
fire
you were 30
you if you
or
got
married.
married.
They'd
Yeah.
fire if you get married or if you turned 30.
Right.
You were no longer, you were used goods, you were a spinster.
30 or married.
They basically, oh my God.
Can you imagine if you turned 30? What that would be like?
It'd be crazy.
That would be crazy. So, there's an example. 1968, the EEOC outlawed sex-segregated employment ads. We've never seen those in our lifetime, obviously, since...
I mean, you kind of knew, like, oh, well, girl's a secretary, but yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, we know that. Intrinsically, we still have very strict ideas of, like, what girls do and what boys do. As a child.
Not really as an adult, though.
What do you think about being a nurse?
I know plenty.
Right? No, but we know, we can reflect upon it, but when you're a kid, like, they're not telling Finnegan.
Well, that's the thing.
Right?
You and I were kids in the 80s.
Yeah. I'm just saying, maybe it is different for the what do we call them? Niblets?
The niblets.
The niblets.
Our nieces and nephews are now called niblets.
Yes.
Yeah.
We have some.
They're very cute.
There are 2 nieces and 1 nephew. She's very cute.
Yeah. We gush.
Yeah. They're really pretty. They're also, this is shocking, they're very blonde.
Yeah. We don't know anything about that.
No.
So abortion, obviously, a huge issue for women.
Yes.
Now supported it, but some women felt that the position was too extreme and formed another organization called Women's Action League. So, Annie, you kind of telegraphed your answer before I asked it. Dicker has an interesting choice of words here. The repeal or abortion laws struck some women as too extreme.
Mm-hmm.
She says the members of WEAL, the Women's Equity Action League, preferred the idea of regulating abortion by reforming abortion statutes, which would make abortion, at least in theory, available to everyone.
Mm-hmm.
So that leads to the October 17th movement, which I'd never heard of. And that's why you read these books. We don't know anything about how we actually got here.
I know.
The main organization of the New Left was Students for a Democratic Society. Here's a quote from them. Late capitalist society creates mechanisms of psychological and cultural domination over everyone. The student nonviolent... Okay, so basically, the book at this point is getting into rapid history. As we get more and more closer to current times, so much is happening, and she's writing such a concise book.
Right.
You know,
it's a lot to cover.
It's a lot to cover.
Yeah.
And I am not doing a great job. I was trying to keep up and keep notes for us to talk about this.
I did not expect him to take this many notes. It's good.
She gets to a very important, which I had heard about before, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. Now, a lot of people know about this because of what a huge role this group of young people played in the civil rights movement, meaning the civil rights movement in respect to race relations. You know, we're talking about gender relations. Race relations are so much more terrifying in America.
at this time,
That-
for sure.
well,
yeah.
throughout all
throughout,
of
yeah.
history. And so the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee has both men and women, and the men not that great, just like the population at large, not doing
You know,
such a bang up job.
every microcosm, every small organization will take on the sickness of the larger organization, of whatever
The larger culture.
whatever the culture is.
Yeah.
Yes, it's pervasive.
I guess that's why we form small cultures, to try to cure ourselves of
We
the
try.
larger culture's
We try,
problem.
but like
I mean, that's why you should start a church. You know, you say
church
that
or you-
the larger society is sinful,
yeah, right.
so we're going to form a smaller culture and we're going to be not sinful.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so
Anyways.
so basically, when Rory Dicker, the author of this book, looks at the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, which had such a huge role in America's race relations in the 60s, which were so fraught, when there were such incredible steps made by the African American community to change a society that was so deeply sick, she bores down to what was the not as inter-being between the races, but within this community of African Americans, what was the relationship between the two sexes who were both operating in the movement. And she asks, I don't know if I asked this or she asked this, who has more contempt? Men for women? Women for men? African Americans for whites, or whites for African Americans? The answer is dependent on the individual. When you're asking about groups, it only matters which group is in power.
I think that's true. And the individual, the person in power is going to have, the flip is true too. You know, whatever is the most threatening.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, will have the most to stay. But yeah.
So African American women within SNCC is what the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, an acronym is pronounced as. There are two women, Mary King and Casey Hayden. They wrote a position paper titled "A Kind of Memo." They pointed out it was difficult to talk
Sounds
about
very
power. What?
Sounds modern.
It is very.
It's like
modern.
a kind of
It's
memo.
kind of a memo. It's like whatever. It's just like sort of.
Obvi. Anyways,
It's like a thing. Becky. It's a Becky thing.
it's Becky.
It's Becky.
It's Becky, yeah.
If you don't know what that means, that's a Sir Mix-a-Lot reference.
Becky?
Yeah.
It's Beyonce.
No, Sir Mix-a-Lot.
Becky with the good hair.
Mm-mm.
What?
Oh my God, Becky! Look at her butt.
It's just like white girls talking to each other, but
Yeah.
Becky? I thought it
That's the
was
yeah, that's
Beyonce.
it.
That's why
Beyonce lifted that from
she-
Sir Mix-a-Lot.
She borrowed that from Sir Mix-a-Lot?
Yes, indeed.
My mind is blown. Thank you.
I'm older than you. A lot.
Not a lot.
A whole lot.
Yeah, a whole lot.
A whole
Yes.
lot.
A whole lot.
I'm almost 30.
I'm only in my 20s.
That's true.
That's
You
true.
don't know much.
Right.
To point out the problems in the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, Mary King and Casey Hayden wrote a position paper titled "A Kind of Memo." They pointed out that it was difficult to talk about the power imbalance within SNCC because of an assumption of male superiority. It termed what we have in America as a sex caste system. What is the difference between women? Why did I jump?
That's a big
Why
jump.
did I jump there?
Big jump.
Okay. Well, I don't know why I didn't write it in here, but I do remember the quote. One of the guys in SNCC said, "Sure, women have a position in SNCC."
Oh, God.
Did you remember this quote?
No, it's probably gross.
It's plum.
Oh.
It's disgusting, but men are disgusting. That's
Yeah.
kind of what I've been getting at, Annie. I don't know if you've been picking up on it.
You know, I'm actually kind of aware.
You are?
Even even though I'm only in my 20s.
Well, you're going to catch on, I think, as we go.
Yeah. Do we get breaks?
We get breaks.
I need a small bio break.
We're going to take a small bio break.
Is that all we have to do?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. It's my outfit.
Ugh. Oh my God, Becky, look at her butt.
Or did you pause it?
I don't know. Well, it's no fun.
Okay.
I don't really know how the battery works. So.
Do you need anything else?
No, I got no beer. I'm gonna get another beer. Okay, so we were talking about a really heavy subject about how, although, you know, sex relations between men and women have been highly unjust in America. The race relations between African Americans and whites have been incredibly unjust to African Americans. It was interesting and sad to point out that even within a subculture, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, which was about racial justice, even there the men could not bring themselves to be respectful to the point of acknowledging that women have the same dignity as men do. And that's just, we get to the point down to brass tacks, there's a real problem with how men are socialized. And then we're getting down to really, really tough questions. Is it just socialization, or are men hardwired to be dicks?
I mean, that's a question? I mean, I think it's a
I think it is a question.
I think it's a combination. I mean, I do think that yes and yes. I mean,
yes and yes.
Yes and yes.
Yes and yes.
I mean,
you don't seem like you have a lot of questions
well,
about
I will
that.
say, I've done some reading, having grown up with two brothers, and there was a lot of testosterone in our house.
Huh? Really?
Shocking.
Shocking.
That testosterone itself and just like the.
But imagine,
Again.
Annie, really you weren't. I mean, you were in a house. No, you were in a house.
One house.
With men.
Right. Who were actually somewhat evolved.
Yeah, I know. It's like you are.
Although,
I was in the most. You act like you were in the bunkers. It's like you were.
Yeah, it was in a non-religious household.
Quasi non-religious.
I will say that this is one element of this book that is not the whole
Christianity's role in misogyny.
The whole religious element is completely not included here.
I point out later in my notes that we don't even talk about art.
Art? Yeah, we don't talk about.
This is her book, which is great, is called A History of U.S. Feminisms, but really it should be called, well, it would be a much worse title. This should be the title, but a title that would tell you more about the book would be A History of U.S. Political Feminism.
Yes.
Because
absolutely.
Wonder Woman doesn't get mentioned in this book.
She does not. And neither does
Black Widow. Yes, you're right. I should have mentioned Marvel's.
Oh, God. No, but really, but you're right. I think that also, though, in American society, religiosity and religion and how that permeates our political sphere and political arena.
Right, it's background. It's not even questioned.
It's not like we don't clearly we don't live in like a separation of church and state, right? I mean, we're still fucking arguing about the abortion issue. Give me a break. So that is something that is this notion of, okay, so like how are men socialized? How does that go? Well, to some extent, one of the biggest socializing factors that we have in the United States is religion.
Oh yeah.
So.
Without a doubt.
So, yes.
Everywhere. You don't have to say in the United States. Everywhere.
Everywhere. I mean, I think it's less prominent probably in some European countries, but.
Which ones?
I mean, I think religion isn't as prominent in many of the like.
Not Italy or Ireland or
That's
England.
France, maybe.
Not a lot of French in America.
Not a lot of French in America, right? Anyways, that is a thing that is completely overlooked. Is that compounding factor for misogyny is when people feel like it's freaking divinely ordained.
All right. There is a lot in this book, and that was a good point, but I'm going to skip ahead to...
Yeah, things are going to start to get much more complicated in this modern context. You're hinting at intersectionality, Brian.
Right. Okay,
We're talking about the compounding factors of race and... Anyways, go on.
Okay, so... Okay, so we've been talking a lot about feminism in the mainstream, which is largely white feminism. And then we talked about SNCC, which was a black student movement in the 60s when it got, well, obviously tension is always high, but that was a very important step in the civil rights movement in general in America. But then we get to the point where women in 1968, and there's an occasion where there's a group of feminists in Sandy Springs, Maryland, and a group of white feminists asked the question of whether they should reach out to Kathleen Cleaver, the communications secretary of the Black Panther Party,
Right.
who Forrest Gump was sorry he started a fight in the middle of the Black Panther Party.
I don't remember that.
Yeah, he's
Okay.
he punches out again.
Okay.
Sorry, I started a fight in the middle of your Black Panther Party.
I don't remember that. Okay.
While some women liked the idea of reaching out to black women, others worried that black women would not come, or that the black women would not be sympathetic to white women's grievances. As one woman put it, I don't want to go to a conference and hear a black militant woman tell me she is more oppressed and what am I going to do about it? Ultimately, they didn't ask Cleaver to join. I think this quote speaks volumes about our society. What do you think, Amy?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, what do you think?
I mean, I think, like I kind of think I've said this before, that like we, to some extent, power is only dictated in relation to another group. I can only have power if someone else doesn't have power.
Yeah, that's the nature of power.
Right. So with that dichotomy, like if I am asking for more, someone needs to have less. So hence why Bell Hooks doesn't capitalize her name.
That's crazy.
I think that's why she doesn't capitalize her name.
Well, I hope not. I mean, I hope it's just to be cool. Why some people wear their hat backwards.
Oh god.
Doesn't make any sense.
Stupid gratuitous.
But
hats.
it's fine.
I don't know if it's fine, but
It's fine.
yeah.
So, obviously, as two white kids, we don't have anything definitive to say about, white-black relations. So we're not going to get too much into that.
I mean, I think that it is, I have it much, much better, and I have way more privilege than many other racial groups. I will acknowledge that.
Yeah, okay. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Racial groups. That's kind of downplaying the real, there weren't a whole lot of other racial groups that were slavery.
Oh, then it's like, yes, absolutely. But I guess I'm thinking of an international context too, like
Right.
Asians, and there's a whole, yes, there are a lot of people out there who struggle way, way, way harder than we do.
Yeah. So we've talked about race and said we really can't get much more into that, but a huge topic for all women is birth control.
Okay.
So in 71, Roe v. Wade,
Yeah.
the Supreme Court concluded that a woman's right of personal privacy includes the abortion decision.
Okay.
Now, here in Kentucky, our wise legislature just told women that they can't have abortions anymore. Of course, because our justice system is not just for show. Our courts told the legislature that they have overstepped their authority and that law is void.
Is it in fact?
Yeah, there's still an abortion clinic in Louisville.
There's one in our
Louisville.
entire state.
In our entire state.
In our entire state.
But that's not weird among southern states.
God, why do men just have to fucking spread their seed? It's just the worst. Anyways, go on.
Well, Okay, now we're getting into the much more modern era
Yes.
of feminism, the third wave of feminism. Well, we're not even there yet, are we? I skipped that part?
Yeah, it's getting in there. Yeah. No, we're here. Well, no.
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 No, we're in the 70s.
Yeah.
Okay. So, so Rory Dicker, great historian, she brought out a lot of vignettes of history that we didn't know about, but we knew were important and we heard the significance of, and it impressed us. Like that asshole from Virginia who
Yes.
tried to derail.
He's like, well, no one would
This-
give equality to women.
Yeah, so we'll just destroy the Equal Rights Amendment by throwing the word women in there.
Right.
Didn't work, miraculously.
Yeah, joke's on you.
But now we're getting into things that I had never heard of before, and I'm not really sure are really that important. But they're part of the book, so let's talk about them.
Okay.
And our listeners, viewers might
Sure.
think they're cool.
Okay.
Whatever. So
They might know a
this
lot
is
about these
this is a
This one's great.
this is a catchy one.
Yeah.
There was apparently an organization called the Women's International Terrorist Conspiracy from Hell. Then an acronym is WITCH.
Love it.
Acronym.
Yeah.
Not the acronym.
Acronym.
Is WITCH.
Yes.
A shame this organization didn't keep going through today, I say. I'm sure if President Trump had ever heard of it, he would have linked it to Megyn Kelly or Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. How would be her name?
Oh,
Yeah,
she's the best.
she's the best. AOC.
Love it.
Made possible by Kentucky.
What do you mean?
Her campaign started in Frankfort, Kentucky.
I did not know that.
Yeah, there's a Netflix documentary.
Yeah, I haven't watched it.
You haven't watched
I
it?
haven't watched it.
It starts in the public library in Frankfurt, where I used to check
No
out books because I would
way.
go there all the time because I
Wow.
was driving so much from Frankfurt and Louisville and Lexington.
We have an amazing student who's interning for her right now.
What?
It's amazing.
That's amazing.
Anyways, okay. So yeah, I don't know about which. I've never heard about it, but it's a
No.
fantastic acronym.
Yeah.
Give me a card.
Which?
I would
Another-
love to be a card carrying.
Well, it's
member
over. This
of
is the
which.
70s. It's over.
Okay,
It's
well.
over. You can start Witch up again if you
Yeah.
want.
All right, sounds good.
But you've got AOC now, so you don't need Witch.
Mm.
Which, another group that's splintered off of the New York Resistance? What is
I'm
it?
not sure.
I can't remember.
Yeah.
Dressed
I love
up as witches, put on a hex on Wall Street on Halloween, which
Fucking love it. I wish it had worked.
you really are very Wicca. Wicking?
Wicca? Wicking?
Wicking?
Wicking.
Drawing the
Dry-
moisture?
Dry
I think
fit?
you are.
Dry fit?
Why would women in the 60s see investors as enemies of women?
Oh my god, it's just like the same. It's like, you know what it is? It's like
Yeah, is it?
the whole Occupy Wall Street is like an echo of this. It's a notion. It's
It's like 40 years between them.
Sure, but it's the awakening of the consciousness that the people who own 90% of our wealth and are 1% of our people, that there is a moral hazard of that.
I wrote some questions down here, and you're going to shoot them down pretty quick, but I want to enunciate them just because I wrote them down.
Okay.
Has the capitalist ruling class of America successfully stamped the strain of socialism and collectivism out of the American feminist movement?
I don't think so.
No.
No.
I don't think you
I don't
would
think
think
so.
that. I think that, but I don't think you would.
No, I think that feminism, that's why so
socialism-
many women love Bernie Sanders.
Did socialism and collectivism ever have an appropriate association with feminism to begin with?
Not at this point, not up to this point, to the 70s.
It's not appropriate?
I don't think
Did
socialism
Did
was.
socialism and collectivism ever have
I don't
an
think they were
appropriate
particularly
association?
collectivist.
You don't think so? What?
like we were just talking
You
about
just
the race
contradicted
relations.
yourself. Did socialism and collectivism ever have an appropriate association with feminism?
Oh, I thought you were saying like, was the feminist movement at some point in like its origin totally socialist and collectivist, which it was not. It was fraught because they were.
Well, yeah, that's what we know about women.
They were
They're fraught.
excluding.
They're not
I know,
absolute.
be nice. They were excluding. They were excluding slaves, former slaves. Like there's a whole feminism as a movement up to this point was pretty much a white movement for white educated women.
Well, it's because America is majority white. I mean, we just talked about how
Sure.
the white majority.
So I mean, maybe I'm misunderstanding your notions of like collectivism, but like I don't think that they were looking out for every party.
Okay. This is how one of my good friends, Mike Brockman, articulated to me that language really is an imperfect form of communication. Your mind and my mind, even though you and I are the most familiar with each other that we can be, cannot understand each other.
In some cases.
We can't use words to understand what we mean.
But when I become a witch and I touch my hand to your head, then I can just
You are a
I
witch.
would.
I'm so sure you are.
God, I wish.
Okay. Doesn't it make it harder for women to create solidarity between women of different wealth levels if part of what you have to accept
Yes.
to want the position of women in general to be improved is also to simultaneously accept that fair competition between individuals naturally results in a power imbalance between those with superior talents and those with inferior talents. Whatever the competitive environment, if there are no artificial mechanisms designed by the group with the intent of protecting people with the lowest levels of capability, then over time won't society segment into those with control of most resources and those with control of very little?
A long question. I think I take issue with a few of your terms here. Showing about superior talents and inferior talents, then I think this fine-tunes it a little bit. Whatever the competitive environment, if there are no artificial mechanisms designed by the group with the intent of protecting people with the lowest levels of capability, no artificial mechanisms designed by the group with the intent of protecting, won't society segment into those with control of most resources and those with control of very little? I mean, this seems like a bigger question that has to do more with capitalism. And we can certainly have that conversation if you would like. I think you have an incident that you can discuss, and then let me.
Super Mario Kart?
Yeah.
All right. This is one of my favorite. One of my favorite people is my friend Brandon, and he has a wife named Erin, and so I'm going to tell you a little story about. I have been playing video games basically since I was 6,
Okay.
maybe earlier.
Well,
But
that's cute. You've been playing them because I was never allowed to.
well, that's not really true. You just weren't even good at them.
Because you never let me practice.
Well, you sucked.
Because you never let me practice.
I don't know about that. That's kind of an assumption.
Let's move on.
Anyway.
You know, practice.
Brandon and I would play Mario Kart. And so one of my friends, Brandon, was playing with his now wife, Erin. And Erin is a proud capitalist. She's a very, very intelligent woman, very good at her job, great at making money. And so she noticed that something that was built in the game. As the game is played, there are mystery boxes that the players can open by driving their go-karts into. And a box opens and you get something that you can use in the game. Some of the items are very useful, like a star that makes you invincible, or a red turtle shell that shoots like a heat-seeking missile to hit the driver in front of you and slow him down while playing. while playing, Erin noticed that when she was in the lead, the boxes she opened never gave her items that were very effective in harming the players or helping her go faster, so she could increase her lead. By the items that the players behind her were picking up were very useful. She asked Brandon if he thought that was just random chance, and Brandon, who had played the game many more times than her, said, "No, that's the design of the game, to keep it close. The players who aren't doing as well are given better stuff to increase their odds of catching up and keeping the race competitive." Erin was incensed at this news. She said, "That's communism." And it is. Games are not as interesting when there is a large disparity in talent levels. That's why most people segment into higher and lower talent levels.
This notion of talent levels is very problematic for me. Yeah. I just don't buy in.
About what?
Are we talking about Mario Kart? Are we talking about feminism? I'm not quite sure. Help me understand a little bit more.
Well,
about how
what
this
do
ties
you
in.
think about that feminism? I mean, going back to the definitions of it, really do tie themselves to socialism.
I disagree with that. I think what they were looking for were actual, very specific. I mean, you're a lawyer, right?
Yeah, sort of.
Legal, sort of. He's licensed. Looking for actual, so the vote. It's not socialism. That's just
Okay, they're rights.
certain inalienable rights, right?
Uh-huh.
So that legally there shouldn't be one class of citizen over another.
No, there should not.
Correct.
Well,
I
what
agree.
about our laws are written that way?
Well, they had to do a lot of work to get the laws such to the point that they are.
No.
Yeah, they
we
couldn't
skipped
vote.
we skipped over that part. The laws were written in 1860 to say that women were able to do all the things they were, but it wasn't until 1920 that the 19th Amendment was passed, and they said women could vote.
You couldn't vote, you couldn't own property, you couldn't have access to your own money, you couldn't. So to some extent, that first wave is
did we get finished in 1920, or what are you saying?
Oh, okay. So I guess I'm not quite sure I understand what this socialism. And so second wave was basically saying we should be able to
Okay, the newspaper. Do you want to
we should be-
revisit the newspaper thing?
No. I'm saying more things like a little bit more beyond that, like abortion.
That's not applicable between men and women, so it's not a good example.
But
Let's
no,
think
because it is.
It's not between women. It cannot be applicable between men and women because it's only applicable to one sex.
Well, if you're saying that you can or cannot
No.
have it,
Bad
it's like,
example. Bad example.
How is
It's
that
only,
a bad example?
Because it's
Socialism.
only applicable to women. Women are the only people who can have abortions.
But if men are saying that they can't,
Okay, this is what I'm saying is that
I'm just not sure I'm tracking where your
Okay.
question's headed.
why is socialism implicated in feminism, which many feminist scholars do implicate?
Well, maybe we need to back up and say, what is your definition of socialism?
Okay, well, let's go back. One of the things they say are, the first definition, the belief in the social, political, and economic equality of the sexes. Economic.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Next one.
Which is,
Well, let's just do
Okay.
the definition. Feminism is the political theory and practice that struggles to free all women of color, working class women, poor women, disabled women, Jewish women, lesbians, old women, so white, economically privileged, heterosexual women. Anything less than this vision of total freedom is not feminism, but merely female self-aggrandizement. And then, bell hooks. Feminism is a struggle to end sexist oppression. Therefore, it is necessarily a struggle to eradicate the ideology of domination that permeates Western culture on various levels, as well as a commitment to reorganizing society so that self-development of people can take precedence over imperialism, economic expansion, and material desires.
I'm not sure that I agree that feminism has been conflated with socialism.
Okay. None of that.
I agree with those things that I wish that was the project of feminism. I think that,
But
I think that capital, I don't know.
Well,
It
what would
depends on-
happen if you just let people do what they want? Wouldn't it just be the status quo? I mean, isn't feminism saying we do have to have the governmental superstructure stop people from doing what they want to do? Or is it, oh, no. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong in assuming that the government is implicated. Is feminism solely a persuasive argument? It's just there to convince men to stop being dicks.
I think that I think it depends on which flavor of feminism is your flavor.
Well, because once you implicate the government and 1920 or 1919 the women got the right to vote. That's a watershed moment because then women become political equals of men.
Not to a full degree though, right?
No, they became
because there's other rights and there's other like legal statutes and other things
No, because if you can vote, you can change them.
I think that is. Well, then why did we need law and legislation happens many different ways, right?
No.
So it can happen through elected bodies.
No.
There's the legal system.
Always happens in legal.
Well, there's the legal system.
Well, like the Supreme Court.
The Supreme Court.
Well,
that's another avenue towards.
Well, that's how. Okay, we have a constitution, and it says we have 3 branches of government: judicial, legislative, and executive. Executive is supposed to execute the laws. Legislative is supposed to create the laws. Judicial is supposed to say whether the laws conform to the original creation of the country, which is the Constitution. So basically, what in 1970 the Supreme Court was saying, and I don't really want to knock it because I'm happy with what they said, was that if you outlaw abortion, you are infringing on the right to privacy.
And I think that women needed to have that particular intervention in order to continue to build.
Right. We do both agree on that.
An even footing.
We agree on that.
Yeah.
But that's not the end all and be all of women's rights.
Is even footing?
No. Abortion.
Oh no. But even footing, right? I think that is part and parcel of the notion
if you get that through voting, I mean, if you can vote and I can vote, then we're even, right?
Well, that has to do with the notion of law, right? So, like, there are many cases where we have had laws that have been adjusted or banned by the Supreme Court because they were not, in fact, just laws.
Yeah, because they don't conform to the Constitution.
Right. So, voting rights alone did not get do not get
no,
people
no, that,
to...
no, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Is that even in your state of Kentucky, a majority of people voted to outlaw abortion.
Not a majority of people.
Yes.
A majority of the people who were elected, who
No,
I agree
no,
with. There's also
no.
gerrymandering and all that kind of
I
stuff.
mean, yeah, you're right. It was not a. It was not a. What do you call that when you put it to everybody? But we don't have that in Kentucky.
Like a referendum.
Yeah, referendum. We don't have a referendum. We can't have referendums in Kentucky. So, but if your representative votes for it, you voted for it.
My state person did not.
Yours didn't, but the majority did.
And I think they're wrong.
Well, that's how representative democracy works.
I think feminism in general is larger than the political sphere.
True.
I think that is one avenue in which, that's a base level in which it gets played out, right? Like, to at least, let's legally make it, like...
Now we're circling back to the difference between capitalism and socialism.
Okay.
Okay. And this is where you didn't concede that there's any association between feminism and socialism, and capitalism and masculinity.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Okay, so do you think that feminism naturally dovetails with socialism in the sense of there needs to be a priority with community making decisions that are in the consideration of women, whereas if you just put it to a vote, whatever happens, happens, where the chips fall where they may. Because if you were in a society where...
I think I'm not quite sure, maybe we need to define your version of socialism. Or like what we're talking about when we're talking about socialism. Yeah.
You don't think feminism argues that there is a role for the state to thwart individuals from doing as they would?
That's what socialism is for you?
Well, that's what government is. I mean, anarchy is everybody doing what they want,
right?
With no regard to, and then government is what are the rules we're going to put on everybody to behave.
Okay.
And then because
I think I'm not quite sure. Socialism and capitalism seem to me, I'm not quite sure, are these various, these are various methods of an economic system.
Well,
or are you more so talking about an
individualist
society versus a socialist society?
Yeah, the difference between a capitalist society is people get to do what they want. Socialist societies, they don't.
I don't know if I agree with that that's the difference of the definition. Yeah.
Alright, well, let's get back to Dicker. You and I can banter about this forever.
Yeah.
Alright, so we're getting into the fractionalism of modern society.
Okay.
So we get to chapter 4, the third wave of feminism.
Yep. Okay.
It's interesting Dicker doesn't just trail off with some lesser events and less noble women from the 30s, 40s, and 50s. Just skips to the 60s, 40 years of American history, no feminism, and then she does the same thing in the second part of the book. She mentions an event in the late 70s and just skips to 1990. Clarence Thomas, confirmation hearings. She also gives no mention of pop culture figures were fictional characters. A whole book on feminism, and Wonder Woman doesn't make the cut. What do you think about that?
I think it's meant to be a short primer, and she can't do everything.
Yeah.
I also think Wonder Woman has, particularly because it's just like been remade.
Mm-hmm.
Like Wonder Woman was not a particularly
Feminist icon.
important icon for people of my generation.
Well, that's a bad.
Right, but I see what you're saying. But I think she didn't include it because she just didn't have time.
Yeah.
So we'll give her a pass.
So women.
But I love where she goes with this.
Yeah, feminism has a resurgence in the 90s. Women are acting and speaking forcefully again about justice between the sexes.
Mm-hmm.
This is when justice becomes, like we've been talking about, it's like you can't put it down in black and white so easily what justice really means.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's interpersonal justice. You know, it's you know, you haven't broken a law, but you haven't respected me.
You've wronged me.
You've wronged me, but not in the way that the law recognizes.
But in a way, go on.
Yeah,
we're gonna get. This is me too.
This
right?
is about manners. This is what Seinfeld was all about. Manners.
Okay.
Did you know that? That's what Seinfeld is all about. It's a comedy of manners. It's what is mannerly.
It's interesting.
Yeah. Okay, so.
So we moved on.
I got the third way feminism is absolutely gobbledygook.
It's very confounding for
It's
you
very
as a
confounding as a man.
Because
I don't know what you're talking about.
Because you know what it is?
What?
It's the ultimate call out of dick culture in a way that isn't legally legislated.
I mean,
right? It's like
everything she puts in chapter 4 is silly. I mean, really, let's have a debate.
Well, I mean, I have to. It's been a while. Now I will say in a while. Okay, here's the thing. This is the problem with like feminism today, for men, is that it's putting you all on blast, and you're not sure what you're supposed to be doing. Did I do something wrong when I was 17? Or 20.
Yes, we did. Yes.
Or 24.
Every day of the week.
Or 34.
Every day of the week we did something wrong.
And now you're like, oh fuck, is it gonna catch up to me? Is it gonna get in the way of my 6-figure job? And I'm just ready to burn the fucking house down. I'm so happy about it that everyone's so scared.
You?
Oh my god, yes.
So you're happy about what?
Well, okay, so this is like, I'm jumping to a very specific moment in current feminism, which is the result of all of this, right? Is that now in modern history, women, going back to like her first chapter of the book, these like subtle things that these subtle traumas we accumulate, these subtle like defenses that we put on as women, this like armor that we kind of wear.
I'll admit, I've been so afraid of men through my whole life, and I'm a man.
Yeah.
I can't imagine the kind of anxiety it's like if you had an incredibly weak upper body.
Tough.
It's tough.
It's tough.
Tough.
And menses. I mean, we have so much. Anyways, so that like there's been certain things that have had. Okay, so here's for example. And I didn't listen to this podcast. Nick.
You ever heard about how Joe Rogan would fuck his wife and 2 daughters up in a fight? It's like I could fuck them up
He
if I had
could, of course.
It's like if I had the flu.
Yes, you could. You're right.
It's all 3 of them at once. Not a problem.
So kind of so third wave became a little bit more about like, okay, let's try to like really define what sexual harassment is. Because we know it, it's like that whole definition of pornography, right?
Which was
I
bullshit.
can't but I can't define it, but I know it when I see it.
That's a terrible definition. That's bullshit. I mean, that was the point of how wrong it is to call something pornography. I mean, that justice thought that was a correct thing to say, but everybody else thinks that is a laughable definition.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, well, whatever. Just to use that as a
Oh, you didn't know that?
no, but to say something as like.
I mean, it makes it wholly subjective. It doesn't help the rest of society. I mean, when you're a judge sitting on a bench, it doesn't help anybody else to say, I'll know it if I see it. It was like, well, you're not going to be around, dickhead. So, what are the rest of us supposed to do?
Okay, see, I'm taking it outside of the legal context, and that in life, sometimes I can't define when I have an uncomfortable moment or somebody's creepy or somebody is pushing the limits but I know it when I see it, right? That we live in this world, like I said, this accumulated trauma, this accumulated armor that we have to wear, like go through this world, that now we're in a situation where we can say, like, you know what, maybe legally we don't have recourse for people being like rape culture. Like maybe the legal system
Well, we
isn't
do have recourse for that.
to some extent, right? But like maybe the way the institution handled that is not great. So that individual person did not have justice. Maybe the way that hang on, let me continue. Maybe the way that because we put so much shame around sexual activity, that we don't report things in a certain way, and so you know, Brian, that there are men that you know who've gotten away with bad shit. I'm sure of it. I'm sure they were classmates of
Well,
yours.
I was there? What are you talking about?
Well, you just know, right? Like,
No.
or you've dated women who've told you stories about shit that's happened to them before, or like it happens. I mean, I was an RA in college. There were several women that I knew that like had terrible shit happen to them. Now, it's in that gray area, and maybe when they went into the room, they actually liked the person and like had a crush on them, and then whatever. So things get complicated. But the truth is that this is specifically leading into the Me Too movement, and how I think the Me Too movement is, first off, would not have been possible without all of the history that's gone before it. But also what it's doing is it's functioning in this new kind of, what do they call it? The court of social, what do they call it? The court of social judgment, or what's that term that people use? Like, this isn't happening, you're not being judged in the real court, but you're being...
Public opinion?
Yeah, the court of public opinion. So that it's like, well, you know, let's just continue to talk about the fact that some people are fucking dicks. And we would like them to be less so. Anyways, that's what the Me Too movement's trying to do. And I think modern day feminism, and then of course we haven't really talked at all about intersectionality and the incredible project of that, which is, I think, tied into socialism and this whole other stuff too. But, I don't know. What do you think about the Me Too movement?
I think it goes back to her first example in the book that, I point out was problematic. Well, all 3 of them are problematic. The girl who doesn't feel good about her body, so doesn't want to eat, is problematic. The woman who's pregnant, that's kind of unambiguous. There's really no reason that a woman who goes to work who's pregnant shouldn't be afforded all the comforts that she she
She was
didn't want.
breastfeeding, but yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Well, whatever. Pregnant,
Right.
breastfeeding, same thing.
Not exactly. But
Yeah,
okay.
pretty much is. Humans are just one of those weird animals. They're bipedal, so basically, the baby being in the body
I see what
and
you're
outside
saying.
the body is basically one part of a continuum.
All right. Okay. Okay.
And really, it shouldn't be looked at as differently.
Okay.
But that's a problem that humans still do look at that as differently. Well, that's fine.
If we basically, as women, just put a giant pouch and we became marsupials.
You know, Annie,
That would
don't
help.
give any
That
Silicon Valley guys any ideas because that might
You'd be like,
happen.
I'm sorry, I'm still pregnant.
Well, it might happen if you keep talking like that.
It's
You
genius.
might start
I'm gonna
having
make it.
women pull 3-year-olds out of their pouch and be like, oh, he can
Be
walk
like,
now.
it's fine now.
He can walk.
That kid can eat peas.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Ugh, it's gross. He's got all his molars.
He's got all his molars. I like it. Anyways, I've never thought about that before. Anyways, these 3 examples are problematic. You were saying. Wow, we still have a lot of notes.
Well, it's a good book.
It's a really good book.
It's a really good book.
What are the problems of this chapter that you were like, this is complicated?
It's all over the place. I mean,
It does get all over the place. I think she's trying to put in a lot, and maybe she didn't have as, you know.
No, I think that's very
You also
much.
in modern history don't have the benefit.
No,
of,
I
like,
think
other
third wave
people saying-
feminism, you've already established all the legal. You've broken down all the legal barriers you need.
Not
to.
really. I mean, still abortion is being.
Well, that's
you know,
regressive. That's regressive.
Yeah, but like we still clearly gotta keep fucking fighting.
Well, yeah, but that's regressive. I mean, that's something that somebody's trying to take away, not something that's already been achieved.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Well, we're gonna have to do it again.
Yeah, it probably will. And I'm not going to talk about it right now, but honestly, I don't think Roe is very well decided.
Well, maybe it should. If it kept been couched in a different way, maybe
Yeah.
it would have been more protected. I don't know. I don't know really that much about the legal stuff behind it, but.
So then, all right. So after the Clarence Thomas hearing, okay, so I've jumped ahead, but
That's okay.
third wave feminism is really talking about the social distinctions between men and women, and I guess we would say the extra legal. Like we've talked about laws, now we're talking about like, you know, it's not everything's about law.
Mm-hmm.
So it's about how we
It's
treat
about
each
body
other.
image. It's also about.
It's about how we treat each other. It's about
yeah.
our social norms.
Okay.
And so Clarence Thomas is a good example of social norms because what he was a dickhead.
Mm-hmm.
He was put in charge of the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission by George H.W. Bush, who was probably...
Yeah, I mean, who's about to come forward about that guy? Come on.
Yeah, he's an evil man.
Yeah.
And so he... So it's about shifting the paradigm of what is acceptable in the workplace and courtship. Like I said earlier, a lot of courtships start in the office. I mean, that's just reality. But
Maybe
he
it should
would.
be less so.
Well, I don't think there should be prohibitions either.
Okay,
Manners.
go on.
We're getting
Yeah.
to the topic of manners. You know.
I think that's diluting it a bit.
No, I don't think so.
That feminism now is about manners?
Yeah, I would say it's all about manners.
No.
Yeah.
I'm still in a country where states are banning abortion, but there are still people
Not
getting,
legally.
There are still people being raped all the time. Domestic
That's
violence.
manners.
Domestic violence is prevalent.
That's manners.
There.
That's not law. That's
That's
manners.
legal.
That's
There's
not
also
legal.
laws
That's
against
not
that.
legal.
People are being constantly breaking the law all the time.
That's manners.
Well, it's not the law.
That's manners.
In manners, you're not saying please and thank you. You're saying in the way manners in which people treat each other.
You're right.
So it's interpersonal as opposed to legal.
Well, it's not legal to assault women, right?
But it's still happening all the time.
Yeah, but
now,
you need to change the law.
Right, but now what we're talking about is like, okay,
Psychology.
now we're talking about like, well, this is illegal, and this is shitty, and we all know this. Why is it still happening? So now what I feel
Because
like
instinct.
I feel like third wave feminism is coming in and saying like, all right, we've got to change the culture in which these things that are still common for women to experience are still common for women to experience.
Right.
And why is it that they are still common? And sometimes they're rare too, but those rare things shouldn't happen either. So how do you get at that? How do you change? So now it's kind of like, okay, we needed to change the culture in a legal capacity. There's like a series of legal laws that need to be put in, things that need to be, committees created, et cetera, et cetera. And now it's like just holding people to task.
That's law.
I think, and this is something I think at some point in the term she talks about this, that what third wave feminist does is consciousness raising.
Yeah, that is in here.
And that the consciousness raising has to happen in the same way that like when people would not have seen slavery as a problem if other people hadn't come in and said, this is an issue. Because this is actually immoral, this is unconscionable, we should not agree with it, we should not be like sitting by and letting this happen. That required a consciousness raising to happen in a culture. And now I think that consciousness raising is just continuing to happen, it's continuing to be fine-tuned. And I think what it's doing is it's taking this feminist project, as I've said a few times before, but and making it more encompassing towards